Thank you, Ali. So hello, my name is Petr Marek, and before I will start, I would like to introduce myself. I'm a researcher of conversational AI. I'm part of Team Alquist, which is competing in international competition called Amazon Alexa Prize. I spent the last 2 summers conducting research in Amazon Development Center Lab 126 in California, and I'm working in a startup company, Promethist.AI, and I'm also pursuing my PhD in conversational AI at Czech Technical University. And for those reasons, I was asked by the organizers of this meetup to tell you what are the differences in research of AI in academia and industry. So for the academia part, I have an experience from my PhD and from Alquist. My PhD is completely academic as it can get, and Alquist is mostly a university project, although it is not just a research, it's also application with thousands of users. And for the industry part, I have experience of working at Amazon, which is a huge corporate, and they do research on a large scale. And from Promethist.AI, which is a startup company, so it is on the opposite side of the spectrum. And when I was preparing for my presentation and trying to find opinions and experiences of others in order to bring you wider perspective, I found out that opinions don't differ much. The experience of most people, which tried both, academic and industry research, is that in academia, you have much more freedom to explore, invent, and try new approaches that don't have to necessarily lead to immediate results. On the other hand, in industry, you are much more limited in what you can do because it must work and generate some value at the end of the day. But you have more resources at your disposal usually. I think that most of you intuitively know that, or it doesn't surprise you much. So instead of this cliche, I decided that it would be much better idea to share with you 3 stories. The 3 stories that show what I have learned about the actual differences in academic and industrial research. So the first story is about Alquist and about how nobody cared. So this story starts in 2017, when our team Alquist was selected to compete in an international student competition Alexa Prize organized by Amazon. The goal of this competition is to create a conversational AI capable of having coherent and engaging conversation about popular topics like movies, sports, or music. And the grand challenge of this competition is to have 20 minutes long conversation, but this line haven't been reached yet. So Amazon selected 12 teams, most of them from top public US universities, and each team developed a conversational AI. Those AIs were then available to anyone in the US who had any Echo device. They said, Alexa, let's chat. One of the conversational AI was randomly selected. Users had a conversation and they rated it from 1 to 5 stars after it based on how satisfied they were. And to be honest, this was the first year of the competition, so nobody knew exactly how to approach this challenge. So we started with what we knew. We developed some baseline machine learning algorithms for intent recognition, named entity recognition, and dialogue management. And once baselines worked, we started to improve them. This is what most of researchers in academia usually do. They have some baseline as a starting point, and then they improve it in order to write a paper. So we did it too. We improved the performance of intent recognition model by a few %. We are getting a daily reports of ratings we obtain from the users, so we expected that it will rise after this improvement. But what do you think? We were quite surprised that it didn't grow at all. So we improved a model for named entity recognition. And we didn't believe it again. The ratings stayed the same. So we tried to improve the models for the last time in the desperate move to increase our ratings, but still nothing. There had to be something wrong. And then someone had an idea to try something else. Let's improve the content of the conversational AI. And just to be clear, we weren't using any generative models at that time. We wrote all the responses by hand and models just selected the best one based on the context of the dialogue. So on one hand, we improved what the Alquist was already saying, and we also added more conversational topics. So we added dialogues about video games, and ratings slightly improved. Then we added music, a slight growth again. So we added fashion, and again, can you see the pattern? The ratings slightly improved with each topic we added. So What is the reason? The reason is that if you improve your accuracy, for example, by 3%, as we did, nobody will notice in most cases. It's just a too small improvement in comparison to the rest of the problems we faced. It can be a good material for a paper, but at least our users didn't care. I also see the recent trend is to get better results simply by growing the size of the model. And it is a dangerous path to take because users will probably not notice, but your wallet will, because you will have to pay more for the cloud infrastructure you run your bigger model on. There's always the cost to performance ratio, which we sometimes forget about. So the second story is from summer of year 2019, when I was interning at Amazon, and it's about how quality mattered. So I was given a chance to have an internship at Amazon thanks to Alexa Prize competition. So I ended up in the lab 126 in California, where I was part of Alexa AI team, which is responsible for the development of a new AI algorithms. So I had an opportunity to learn and be part of a research which is conducted on a large scale and which is really business oriented. But before I will continue, I have to make clear that all I will say is my personal opinion and I don't represent Amazon. They simply require me to say that every time before I will talk about the internship. And also I will talk more generally because I can't disclose any details. So I was placed in the team of mostly researchers and my goal was to conduct some research and bring some results at the end of the internship. And you can all probably imagine that I started the internship by cloning some GitHub repository. It's obvious. So I created my own branch and started to write code to run experiments. And you probably know how it works. You cut corner here and there to simplify your life, to get numbers faster. Well, my life was easy. Not for long though. Problems emerged around the middle of my internship. Because my manager, and he was from the Belgium, told me, well, your results are promising. We would like to integrate your code in the main branch, so make a CR. And I was like, what is CR? And he answered me, well, it's code review. Code what? Well, do you remember those few cut corners? Yeah, they did some changes to the code which prevented easy merge request into main branch. Well, fortunately, there was also Bill in the team, and it might surprise you because despite his very American sounding name, he was a Chinese. And he was one of the dedicated software engineers in the research team, and his purpose was to make sure that all the code is clean and everything is running smoothly from the software engineering perspective. So he helped me a lot to make everything right. Well, up to that moment, it was always just me and maximally a few guys from the office running experiments. And we were writing some code and it just worked at our scale. But suddenly I was part of a much larger team. And in a larger team, it's not just about numbers, obviously. It's also about the quality of the code. Because if the code is clean and easy to understand, other team members can use it and build on top of it. So for me, the lessons learned was that in industry, the quality of code matters and good companies have dedicated people who are responsible for that. And the third story I have for you today is from my recent startup, Promethist.AI, and it's about how data changed. So in Promethist.AI, our mission is to develop a platform for development of conversational AI voice-first applications. And our goal, which we aim to achieve, is to be able to create a first AI therapist with human-level empathy and understanding. We see it as one of the hardest tasks there are today in conversational AI. So each step we take towards it will dramatically improve the abilities of conversational AI in all other domains as well. Also, we understood from the beginning that we can't achieve this task alone. We need domain experts that would help us because we understand machine learning and others from our startup understand software development, but nobody really understands the underlying psychology of human conversation. So we added linguists and psychologists into our team. And those people have completely different background than us. They are not that technical, but they are great at understanding how conversations work. And because of our differences, you can imagine that we hadn't an easy start. Both sides had to learn a lot. For example, one of their tasks is to design a conversation out of which we generate training data for our models. And you know how it works in machine learning. The data set is usually some text file, at least in the field of natural language processing, with a format that is easy to read for computers, but hard to follow for people. Well, it's definitely not a Microsoft Office that the ordinary people are used to, which we learned a hard way. Another thing we learn is that in research, you have a fixed data set on which you train your machine learning algorithm. It is fixed so you can reproduce your results. But it wasn't the case in this story. It was more like, hey, I created a new conversation. Can you please add it into the system? And after some times, I have made a few changes. It sounds more natural now. Can you include it, please? And after some time again, I added few more formulation of the answer. That was really the last change. I was satisfied finally. So we had to manually train the model each time there was any change made in the data, and we had to integrate it into the system. We spent quite a lot of time on this manual task, which we could have spent on improving our technology. So it wasn't sustainable in the long run. Well, the solution fitted into the mission of the company quite nicely. It was to develop a system which would enable non-technical people to create new conversational data, and most importantly, to retrain our models automatically on it completely without us. It was quite large investment for us initially, because software developers from our team had to develop a system for data and model versioning for automatic training. And we researchers had to come up with models that works reliably on diverse and small amount of training data and that train fast. But we saw multiple benefits quickly. We researchers have now much more time for actual research. The system served as a starting point for a whole platform that covers multiple aspects of conversational AI development, and domain experts can iterate their work much faster, so they can improve the abilities of conversational AI at pace which we haven't been imaginable to us before. So the difference I see from my perspective is that in pure research, you work with stationary data set in most of the times, and it influences the type of models we develop. But at least in our startup, it is not the case. We are facing data that are changing at a fast pace, and thus we face completely different set of problems. And we need to account for that in our models. For example, we need our models to be trained as fast as possible, so the domain experts don't have to wait a long time to see the results of their work. And I think it is sometimes overlooked by some academic research. So that was the last story. What are the take-home messages for you? Well, I demonstrated to you that in real applications, nobody will probably notice a slight improvement in the model's accuracy, although it is something we are making papers about. I showed you that in large companies, the research is not just about running experiments, but it is about clean code that can be understood and modified by other people too. And also that in practice, you might encounter problems in which it is beneficial for you to create tools for non-technical people to create and modify training data for your machine learning models. And thus it is important to focus also on properties that are overlooked by some papers, like time it takes to train your model. So thank you. I'm Petr Marek from Promethist.AI.
Thank you, Marek. It was great. So first of all, we're keeping fingers crossed because NeurIPS.AI is also in this finalist for this year competition. So we wish you good luck with this, and also good luck with your startup. Hopefully it will be successful. And we have quite a lot of questions for you. We'll take top 4. Oh. And the first one is, in any of the surprises years, what improvement in methods models had the biggest positive impact?
It's a bit sad to say, but we didn't saw much improvement in the model quality. but I think that the biggest influence is simply like user experience. So supporting more topics, to be able to answer more more questions, stuff like that. So yeah, like
And I have
it
an
was
extra question.
also sorry, also one of the big improvement or was, I think that most of the team improved their way how they add new content. If you add more content faster, then it will satisfy more users. Yeah.
Okay, and one more question. I know that you had an Alexa One data sets. Did you with time improve like with different sources of data?
No, sorry, I didn't catch that.
So I know that a couple of years ago you presented that you used one data set, and now you talked about different data that we need like different sources of data and how quality they are. Did you also improve it with new data?
Well, basically, yes, we are adding more data, but like if we want to include a new conversational topic, we need data for that. And you can imagine that if you want to add conversation about gardening or fishing, there are no data sets available on the internet which covers these topics. Yeah, maybe you can like download some subreddits and there are some comments, but they are not usually representing the real conversation. So like the data are really biased. So this is the reason why we developed a system that allow us to create our own data, basically like how we want the conversation to look like.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, would you say that in industry it's more teamwork and cooperation? Would you say that in academia is more interested to go to dig deeper in each problem?
Yes, I totally agree, because like in the industry, it's always or at least in the corporate, like in startup, it's different. It's closer to academia, I would say. But in the corporate, for example, my experience from Amazon was that suddenly I was part of a huge team, and there was like many persons, and they influenced my work too. And I was also working. In academia, you usually start from scratch, or you clone some GitHub repo and you somehow modify it, but it's still like 90% it is your work. But in the corporate, your starting point is much further because you have something to build on top of.
Thank you. And again, the question about data, I guess it's popular. Can you say more about fast model retraining with new data?
Well, yeah. I would say that we are just limited in the type of models which we can use. For example, we could use BERT for dialogue management or for intent classification, but it is not viable for us because the training takes time and we really need results fast. So for this reason, we are, I would say, a bit stuck with the much simpler methods that works reliably and train fast. So we can deliver results in matter of like seconds and not minutes or hours.
Thank you. And the last question, if you would choose startup, industry, academia, if you will start from scratch, for example, if you're a student, so what you would go for?
Well, if I'm a student, it's definitely, you should start in academia, because as a student, you are basically already in academia. But if I have to choose now something, I already made the choice. I selected the startup. So